Russian state media is reporting that Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov on Thursday, in fact, confirmed that preparations are being made for President Vladimir Putin's visit to India. That's correct. Lavrov has said that Russia is actively strengthening ties with major global powers. Well, now this comes after a meeting, in fact, between Russian officials and Indian officials, and this news is just breaking on the World Report right now, where Russian media, state media, in fact, has confirmed that President Vladimir Putin will, in fact, soon be visiting New Delhi. Now, this also comes at the back of ongoing talks regarding the Ukraine peace deal just after the talks took place in Saudi Arabia's Riyadh last week with US as the mediator. Now, it's very important to remember here, PM Modi still remains, after 3 years of this long war, the only international leader to have met both Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky. So he is one international leader who has access and ears on both sides of the aisle, which is very important in such a global conflict. For more of this story, my colleague Vivek joins us. Vishal, tell us more. What's the latest you're picking up?
The latest from the TASS agency, which is the state media agency of Russia, it's saying that the arrangements are currently being made for the visit. The dates have not been announced yet. This is the top diplomat of Russia, Sergey Lavrov, saying so. And he said this in a video address while doing a video conference titled Russia and India toward a new bilateral agenda. This was held on Wednesday, is what the state media report is saying. And they've said that Lavrov has noted that the Indian Prime Minister paid his first foreign visit to Russia upon his re-election last year. So they are sort of complying to the visit, and they have confirmed that Putin will be coming to India. But they have not given the date, as I mentioned earlier. The details will need to be ironed out. This will be a high-profile visit. India has been hailed the world over as one of the one of the countries that has gone onto the world stage and talked about peace very often. So all of that will probably be looked at, and there could be many bilateral deals that could be signed, but all of that remains to be seen. But for now, we can say that Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, will most likely be visiting India pretty soon.
Thank you so much for that, Vishal. Moving on, amid frosty ties between Delhi and Dhaka, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has written to Mohammad Yunus, chief advisor to Bangladesh's interim government, wishing him on his country's Independence Day and, in fact, reiterating India's commitment to advancing the partnership between the two countries. Now, relations between the two countries have become tense, especially after the Awami League government led by Sheikh Hasina was toppled after a nationwide movement, and the former Prime Minister was also forced to flee to India. She's currently in New Delhi. The interim government formed after the change of guard is led by Nobel laureate and economist Mohammad Yunus. Now, amid reports of attacks on minorities, India shared its concerns with Bangladesh. Dhaka has said the attacks are politically motivated, not communally. Chinese President Xi Jinping is all set to meet Bangladesh's chief advisor Mohammad Yunus on Friday. Yunus is currently on a 4-day visit to China, with Dhaka and Beijing expected to sign pacts on trade and economy. US President Donald Trump has announced 25% tariffs on imported cars effective the 2nd of April. Now, the new levies mark an escalation in Trump's trade war against top US trading partners and allies. Mexico and Canada, in fact, were among the US biggest automotive suppliers just last year. Now, Trump has said that these duties would prompt companies to manufacture in the US, though analysts say that the extra import costs would in fact be passed on to the customers at the end of it. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen described the move as bad for business and worse for consumers. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Mike Carney has labelled it as a direct attack on Canadian workers. Listen in.
But this is very exciting to me. This is the automobile industry, and this will continue to spur growth like you haven't seen. Before I was elected, we were losing all of our plants. They were being built in Mexico and Canada and other places. Now those plants largely have stopped and they're moving them to our country.
President Trump announced 25% tariffs against our auto industry. And this is a direct attack, to be clear, a direct attack on the very workers that I stood in front of, uniform workers I stood in front of this morning at the Ambassador Bridge.
I think there are two aspects. One is the car manufacturers and the other is the auto component manufacturers, and both get a tariff of 25%. In terms of car manufacturers, I think the biggest exposure to the US market is to Tata Motors through JLR. And note here that JLR does not manufacture as of now anything in US. Their manufacturing is primarily in Europe, UK and Slovenia. So they might face some tariff structure there. And Mahindra also have their tractor business, but it's very small percentage of their overall portfolio. So not that much impact, but JLR will definitely have an impact of this 25% tariff. And this also changes the way companies have been planning their product portfolio, their production manufacturing plant. So let's see how it all pans out. But the other aspect of auto component, which is between India and America, it's about India exports around $6.5 billion annually, auto components annually to the US, and that sector might get impacted. If the idea is to manufacture more in the US, I think right now the clear impact will be the prices of products in the US will go up very quickly because, getting manufacturing back to US will take several years. No plant can be manufactured in a day or two. So right now, I think the impact on the industry will be, on the US cars will be that the prices will go up. And from here on, how various governments negotiate with US will also depend, will also make sure that that tariff structures have different structures with every country. Now in India, what is interesting is that China is a bigger auto component supplier, but is now facing a higher tariff. India has got 25%, but China has got another 25% on all of exports from the US.
Donald Trump has said that larger tariffs could be placed on the European Union and Canada if they both work together to do economic harm to the USA. Now, Trump said this in a post on his Truth Social platform, and I quote here, "If the European Union works with Canada in order to do economic harm to the USA, large-scale tariffs far larger than currently planned will be placed on them, both in order to protect the best friend that each of these two countries has ever had." German news magazine Der Spiegel has reported that the private data of top security advisors to Trump can in fact be accessed online, adding to the fallout from the officials' use of a signal group chat to plan airstrikes on Yemen. Now, according to reports, mobile phone numbers, email addresses, and in some cases, even passwords used by National Security Advisor Mark Paul's Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard can be found via commercial data search services and even hacked data dumped online. Staying with the story, the White House is continuing to try and downplay the security blunder. That's right, the security blunder when a journalist was added to a group chat about plans to, in fact, bomb Houthi targets in Yemen. The White House has reacted furiously after the Atlantic magazine published messages between national security officials in a signal group chat in their entirety. President Donald Trump has called the reporting a witch hunt, and he has even declared the publication a failed magazine. Now, this comes after the Atlantic magazine published what it says is a timeline of war plans shared by Trump officials in messages on the Signal app that mistakenly included its editor-in-chief, Jeffrey Goldberg, as well. Meanwhile, on the political front, things are heating up too. The Democrats are calling for both the Defense Secretary and National Security Advisor to resign. Listen into what US President had to say, followed by a report from Washington, in fact, by NDTV's very own Kate Fisher.
Hegseth is doing a great job. He had nothing to do with this. Hegseth. How do you bring Hegseth into it? He had nothing to do. Look, it's all a witch hunt. Here we are talking about some of the greatest business deals ever made. The greatest companies in the world are moving into the United States, and you want to ask about whether or not Signal works. I don't know that Signal works. I think Signal could be defective, to be honest with you.
Well, Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth has reiterated that no classified information was shared on the chat. But screenshots of the thread posted by The Atlantic show him giving specific details of timing and the weapons used. The Atlantic decided to release them after President Trump and members of his government accused the editor of lying and because of their repeated assertions that the information was not classified. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that President Donald Trump, quote, continues to have confidence in his national security team. And that was in response to a reporter's question on whether anyone would be fired over this. But several Democratic lawmakers have been calling for resignations. During an Intelligence Committee hearing on Capitol Hill, Democrats criticised the administration for not acknowledging that it was a mistake or apologising, and called for those resignations. At the hearing, administration officials insisted the chat had not included classified information, and Democrats disputed that, while Republicans acknowledged that it had at least included sensitive information. Well, the top Republican and Democratic senators on the Senate Armed Services Committee are now asking the White House to expedite a Defense Department review of the incident. Kate Fisher, NDTV, Washington.
Thousands of Palestinians marched between the wreckage of a heavily destroyed town in northern Gaza on Wednesday in the second day of anti-war protests, with many chanting against Hamas in a rare display of public anger against the militant group. Now, the protests, which centered mainly on Gaza's north, appeared to be aimed generally against the war, with protesters calling for an end to the 17 long months of deadly fighting with Israel that has made life in Gaza insufferable, to say the least. But the public calls against Hamas, which has long repressed dissent and is still, in fact, ruling the territory months into the war with Israel, were rare. Istanbul's opposition-run municipal council has elected an interim mayor to run the city after Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu was jailed pending trial over graft charges that he and his supporters deny and call politicized. Authorities, by the way, have arrested more than 1,400 protesters, and this includes numerous photojournalists as well. They are clamping down on coverage of a movement that Mr. Erdogan describes as evil, but which is driven, in fact, by anger at cumulative political repression and the powerless state of the economy. The next presidential election is not due until 2028 in Turkey. Meanwhile, in the UK, Rachel Reeves is facing a backlash after the government's assessment said that benefit cuts will push 250,000 more people into poverty and are now set to impact 3.2 billion families. Pardon me. Meanwhile, angry critics contrasted the Chancellor's austerity cuts for the poorest to the recent controversies over her acceptance of £7,500 from a friend to buy clothes and free tickets to a Sabrina Carpenter concert. The EU has warned that Russia must fully withdraw from Ukraine before European Union sanctions on Moscow can be lifted, striking a blow to Donald Trump's hopes of striking a quick ceasefire deal. The US president agreed to Russian demands that international sanctions must be lifted in return for the partial truce in the Black Sea after marathon talks in Saudi Arabia earlier this week. French actor Gerard Depardieu has said he loved women and was not a groper as he made a final plea at his sexual assault trial in Paris. Now, this after his friend and fellow actor Fanny Ardant vouched for him. Depardieu, who has acted in more than 200 films and television series, has been accused of improper behavior by around 20 women. But this is the first case which has ever come to trial. In West Philadelphia, where he was born and raised, now there's a street, in fact, called the Will Smith Way. That's correct. Philadelphia Mayor Cheryl Parker and the city leaders honored the Oscar and Grammy winner on Wednesday, renaming a street next to Smith's old high school. He reminisced about learning the values of hard work and education from his mother and father before hitting it big as an actor and a rapper.
Legacy of Will Smith, a West Philadelphia native. 3.